Spider-Man 2 is hard to describe. Released in 2004 and penned by the writers of Shanghai Noon, The Amazing Spider-Man, and Spider-Man 3, and directed by the man behind The Quick and the Dead, The Gift, and Oz the Great and Powerful, Spider-Man 2 is the culmination of everything Spider-Man represented to that point. It takes everything that worked in the first Spider-Man, believable human interactions, consistent fantasy world, and subtle nuanced storytelling, and does something totally new and different, bringing us not only the most unbelievable Spider-Man we've ever seen, but possibly the most unbelievable comic book movie of all time. Sorry, Tony.
I'm sorry.
So why are there still corners of the internet where it's not critically acclaimed? Why are there resistors who've called the movie juvenile, solipsistic, cartoonish, and basically saying they'd like to look in its eyes as it dies? Of course, such naysayers often go to the straw man tactic of trolling the film for easy targets and exaggerating their transgressions. Like how Peter's power loss is psychosomatic, yet he lets it endanger the lives of innocent civilians. Or how Dr. Octopus can take punches from Spider-Man even though he's just a normal person. Or how the movie works so hard to show us how hated and unlucky Peter is, so that we can feel pity for a scientific genius who can lift a dump truck. Or how the ground shakes when Doc Ock is nearby, or how this doctor can have such strong nails, or how Aunt May can suspend herself from an umbrella but struggle to get to her feet, or how Peter can ignore sirens, a mugging, and a 75% crime hike and still be considered a hero. But you see, these naysayers are under the misapprehension that it's an intellectual type of rational logic that makes a movie good, suggesting even that good movies almost require this internal logic to make them cohesive, communicable, and engaging. But what they don't realize is that this isn't some oppressive world that imposes consistency or mandates believability. It's about something greater than that. A type of logic that is always right, even when it's wrong. The logic of the heart. And the heart knows that what feels good is good. That's Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 is written from the ground up. The story and thematic conflicts grow organically from fully realized three-dimensional characters. It's not interested in hollow manipulations of its audience through contrivances and convenience. It's the type of fantasy storytelling that explores a higher truth, the truth of subjective lived experience. And maybe that challenges some people, turns them away, because it dares them to open up to the concept of immutable subjectivity, to see the person in all of us that Peter represents. The underdog, the quiet achiever, the victim of a world that doesn't care, that isn't willing to see what we see, that won't give us what we want no matter how long we wait. This is the core of Spider-Man 2, the triumph of the heart over the head. Spider-Man 2 knows that the key to good storytelling is not about connecting to the subjective truths of the real world, but to the viewer's objective emotional truth. A feat it accomplishes by utilizing a classic technique of film and storytelling, by presenting things one way, but meaning them in another. Spider-Man 2 uses subtext. Subtext is the implicit meaning behind what we witness on screen, whether it be camera framing, character action, or a line of dialogue. It's what the film is suggesting, but which isn't necessarily immediately obvious. It's the messages the audience needs to deduce by comparing patterns in concurrent and contradictory actions in story incidents and character behaviors as they play out. Such as the subtext that MJ gets engaged to John because 3 minutes earlier she was struggling with her feelings for Peter, and this is her way to show him that she's conflicted. Or the subtext that Harry is secretly about to lose his father's company, and that's why he spends so much time pursuing fame and fortune, because his dad's death means he no longer has any. Spider-Man 2 weaves its themes, plot, and character motivations together like this throughout, in layers of multiple meaning that engage the audience in an active viewing experience, and one that mirrors Peter's proactivity as a character, figuring out the story as he does, and enables us to really focus in on how it feels for him to suffer and struggle in all those ways that we can relate to. So let's look at a few examples, starting with superpowers. There's a subtext around which much of Peter's character arc is built, the subtext that anxiety makes Peter lose his webs. It works perfectly because, as we saw in the first movie, it's confidence that gives Peter the ability to shoot webs. The more confident he is, the more webs he can shoot. The establishment of this logic in the first film is why it works so well for this story when Peter loses his powers. Like when a runner loses their confidence in real life. It's been established that Spider-Man's powers are tied to confidence, So they use that fact here to visually demonstrate Peter's growing anxiety about being Spider-Man. Like when Spidey fights Doc Ock for the first time. Here he lacks confidence, but being caught by Doc Ock gives him confidence. This is also why it's morally good that Peter continues to fight crime even as his powers become unreliable. He's not actually putting innocent civilians in danger in these moments where he knows his powers might fail, because during those moments he has the confidence not to. He's heroic enough to only lose confidence when no one else will be hurt. Another great example of superpowers subtext is Doc Ock and his sunglasses. It makes sense that Doc Ock is the only one who needs to wear goggles at the energy demonstration because his eyes are his weakness. They represent his vision and goodness as a scientist and the fragility of his optimism, and his wearing goggles and then progressing to sunglasses symbolizes the gradual darkening of his vision from altruism and pursuing the good of humanity to self-serving greed and the acquisition of power. Not only in how he becomes heavy enough to cause the ground to shake when he approaches, but also providing him with the physical durability to withstand Spider-Man's face punches. The wall crawler hits Otto repeatedly in the face and body, not only with weighty bags of coins, but with his feet and fists, which would normally pulverize a mortal human, rupturing organs and splintering bone. He even slams Otto's body into a brick wall hard enough to do this, and tosses him into a car hard enough to do this. But because of his sunglasses, Otto is impervious to every blow. His new dark vision of the world cannot be shaken. This is bookended cleverly in one fight when, after dozens of ineffectual hits from Spider-Man, Otto is defeated by a blow from May's umbrella, all because she hit him in the sunglasses. This reinforces the subtext that while Otto may seem like a normal man with metal arms, his glasses make him so much more. Just as his villainy stops him getting hurt emotionally from the loss of his wife, his sunglasses stop him getting hurt physically from punches, car metal, and brick walls. Likewise, his complete lack of back scars at the demonstration means he's either not used the arms since the last punctures healed, or this is the first time he's ever used them. This subtext portrays him as untarnished, innocent, and foreshadows the corruption of his character. He's clearly not prepared for this.
I certainly know the consequences of the slightest miscalculation.
Likewise, the tiny glass shell he builds around the most important part of the metal arms, the inhibitor chip, the fact he crafted such an integral piece of equipment from such flimsy materials represents the fragility of Otto's ego, the false confidence he has, and the fact that he will inevitably fail, just like the tiny defense system that can't withstand the precise type of energy that his arms are designed to encounter. Now, there are subtler ways that subtext is used in Spider-Man 2, one of which is with New York itself, or rather its inhabitants. Throughout the first half of the film, everyone is passively aggressively rude to Peter. Everyone, often for no reason. Even his best friends,
Isn't that right?
love interest, and aunt seem to not really care much about what he's going through or his feelings. They all seem to think he's responsible for everything bad in their life and every emotion they're having, all the time.
Isn't that right? Huh, brother?
This ties into Peter's reluctance to let Jameson use photos of Spider-Man because he fears the people of New York will hate Spider-Man. But throughout the movie, nobody is ever mean to Spider-Man.
Yes, Mr. Spider-Man.
The people of New York clearly don't hate him, they hate Peter, just like his loved ones.
Oh, you.
This is taken further in the second half of the film, where Peter bravely decides to become a hero for himself instead of others. And the people of New York start to like him. As easily as he was hated at the start, now he's suddenly liked and even lusted after, something we can all relate to. This is a clever subtext the movie uses to justify Peter believing that the world is ultimately against him, because it is. His self-pity and wallowing makes sense to us because he's basically a failure and is incredibly passive in his attempts to fix things.
Am I not supposed to have what I want? What I need? What am I supposed to do?
This represents those times in life where everyone's mean to us and we just take it, not fighting back or expecting people to take responsibility for themselves, all because it reinforces our sense of victimization. It feels true because it feels true. As MJ says, the brain and the self are two separate things, and nobody can be held responsible for the workings of their own brains. Most of the time, our only option is to take it out on the people around us, often without warning. And so many of Peter's interactions in this film show us the kind of conversational ambushes that we face every day, with characters being polite one minute and furious the next.
I don't have time for girls right now.
Why, you dead?
I've been kind of busy.
Taking pictures of your friend?
This is part of what makes Peter the hero of this story. He takes all the blame. He shows us it's okay to be a victim to our emotions and the emotions of others, because as he says, Spider-Man's brain plays tricks on him too. Maybe the best example of subtext in the film is the way it subtly links the hero with the villain, when Peter and Otto intersect through the introduction of poetry. Otto, a man who, as far as we know, has only pursued one woman in his whole life, proceeds to lecture Peter on the keys to courtship. He tells Peter that poetry never fails, even though he's never met Mary Jane and barely knows Peter and doesn't know their interests or their relationship history. And in his response, Peter mirrors Otto's naivety and optimism, not only in that he immediately takes the advice of a man he's just met, who's a paunchy scientist in his 50s, but then he later interrupts an adult conversation with Mary Jane with poetry.
I've been reading poetry lately.
Whatever that means.
And thinks that will fix everything. And the fact that this doesn't work in the slightest.
Day by day, he sighed with passion. Day by day.
Don't start.
And the fact that Peter is surprised about that only reinforces this clever subtext. That Peter has no idea what he's doing. And that the key to Peter's success is not to do anything. Over and over, his experiences teach Peter that small changes over time don't help. Life is about grand gestures. It's all or nothing. It's as simple as that. Like how by the end of the story, he realizes he can't be Spider-Man and happy at the same time because he's exhausted every other option. All of the options. Like that one time he tried to go to MJ's play, and then when she got upset, he simply explained he was in an accident and got there late, but was shut out by a rude usher for no reason. Or when he proves his worth as a photographer at the planetarium. Or when he tries to get those super newsworthy photos into the newspaper.
Pigeons in the park, a couple of geezers playing chess.
Or when he explains to Harry that, as the autopsy confirmed, not to mention the coronial inquest, Norman Osborn had 2 gigantic puncture wounds in his abdomen from a goblin glider. But even after trying all those things, no matter what he does, Peter just can't keep being Spider-Man. Until MJ lets him. And that is perhaps the greatest subtext of Peter's character. That like us, if he waits long enough, someone will come along with some chocolate cake or leave their fiancé at the altar with a note without a shred of remorse, like a psychopath, to come and say that even when they're mean to you,
Oh, you.
or doubt your intentions,
Whatever that means.
over and over, or aren't really there for you in any practical way, that they will always be there for you, because they always have been, even though they haven't, and that you can be whoever you want to be. Like you can have powers, or you can turn them off, you can ignore crimes, or stop ignoring crimes.
Eagle!
And it's fine. You don't have responsibility to anyone else. Just you. That's what makes Spider-Man a hero. And it always will. Because ultimately, Spider-Man 2 is the epitome of self-actualization. With subtext, it shows us that everyone only sees the world from one perspective, and that's what makes us heroes. When the world is against you, you wait. You try to make that one choice that will fix it all. And if that doesn't work, you wait for that one person who will fix it all. Maybe that's simplistic. The best ideas often are. Maybe it goes over some people's heads. Maybe subtext is complicated, like the difference between sarcasm and irony, or the fact that subtext is neither of those. And it doesn't always land right away, but that's okay. That's why we have Spider-Man 2, showing us what it means to present things in one way and mean them in another. A masterclass. Good night.